Welcome to our USITT webinar this afternoon, and I am going to hand it over to Deb.
Hi, friends. My name is Deb Shearer, and I am so excited that you are joining us today. We are here to talk about the new purpose grants, so hopefully you'll leave with some really exciting ideas. First thing first, let's introduce members of this subcommittee that is specifically designed to help you find success with this grant. As I said, my name is Deb Shearer. I use she, her pronouns. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota, home of the Dakota people, and I work for Children's Theater Company. And I'm going to take it the way my screen has aligned people. Up next, we have Ellen Marie.
Hi, I'm Ellen Marie Kazel, and I use she, they pronouns, and I am the stage management mentor at Ohio Northern University. And I've also sat on both sides of the grant table, both the giving and the receiving side. So I'm eager to hear what you're looking at proposing and see if we can help you get some successful grant funding.
Ashley.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley Bellett, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm coming to you from Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. And I'm going to pass it over to Richard.
And I am Richard Arnold. I am a professor of design and technology at Elmhurst University, just outside of Chicago. I'm happy to be involved with this, as I've had experience raising about $500,000 for a renovation of our theater space.
Not quite that. It keeps.
Awesome. Mark.
I'm Mark Shonda, Dean of the College of Fine Arts at the University of Kentucky, longtime USITT member, and was involved in the very first small grant that was ever issued by USITT back in approximately 1987, which funded a Lisa computer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Happy to be here.
And Beth.
Hi, I'm Beth Martell. I am a theater designer with DLR Group in Chicago. That'd be theater, the building, as opposed to theater, the art. And I'm also the lead investigator for the Physics of Theater project, which was one of the projects that was seed funded through grant funding at USITT and has been running now for roughly 20 years.
Awesome. I'd like to highlight two things on the screen that you're seeing right now before we jump in. The first is that the folks who are on this webinar right now are here to serve as a liaison for your success in this grant. We will not be reading any of the grants. We will not be deciding who gets grant funding. We are here to help answer questions in any way that we can. So there's no conflict. Please ask us questions. We want to do everything we can to set you up for success. And then the other half of our committee will actually be the ones reading the grants and deciding who is going to get funding. So no conflicts. Please ask all of the questions. And as all of the best questions come 5 minutes after the webinar ends, we've created an email address that you can email us. It's research@usitt.org. So as you're getting your proposals together, as you're just thinking through what kind of projects you might want to be able to do, what's already on the burner, you can reach out to that email address, and one of the 6 of us will reply to you so that you can get a little more information without having to wait for another meeting. Up next, I'd like to introduce Mark.
So as was obvious in the introductions, many of us involved in the Research Activities Committee have had connection to USITT's Heritage for Research Support. And that mission drive goes all the way back to the original founding of USITT's purpose statement to be engaged in research in the arts and entertainment field. We've had various iterations of this, use of USITT funds, which primarily come through the Cook Endowment, which its primary purpose is for research engagement. Funding individual grants of different scale, supporting faculty in higher education in terms of sabbatical work. And the most recent successful program was the Innovations Grant Program that funded major inquiry into innovations in our industry. The grant program has been slightly on a hiatus as many things have been in our industry, due in part to COVID. But this summer, the President Satter stepped forward and wanted to reactivate the program, and that became the Purpose Grants program for this year. These are $10,000 is the maximum per grant recipient, as is obviously in the descriptions. But the focus of these grants are to be looking at our current industry restart efforts, increased sustainability, or improved working conditions. Those are sort of the three very broad themes of inquiry that are present to support by these grants. And connected to all of them is the through line of President Satter's desire that we have some aspect of the core values of the Institute explored in this inquiry. And to remind you, those core values, which have good explanations connected to them, but they are those values of inclusion, excellence, and responsibility. So this is a new type of grant application process, in part because we wanted to make sure, because we're blazing a new trail, to provide support and resources to the individual who's applying for the grant. So as already stated, the six of us that are on the screen today from the committee are not part of the adjudication process. We are the support team. And this is modeled in part off of the grant application process one might do for a National Endowment for Humanities grant or a National Endowment for the Arts grant, where you might have a grants officer that actually assists you in the process of developing your grant proposal. So that's the background on the Purpose Grants program that I can provide.
Thank you, Mark. So one of the most difficult parts about getting started with a new grant program is what type of research could we possibly be expecting to see when we see these grant applications? As Mark described, there are lots of options, lots of things to go, but we felt that giving two really solid ideas would be helpful to kick off conversations about what is possible with these funds. So I'm going to pass it off to Ashley for a first descriptor.
All right, let me get my mute button off. So actually, before I do this, how many of you who are here have actually written a grant proposal before? You can use your reaction button. Okay, we've got one. Awesome, awesome. Got a few, excellent. Oh, awesome. Okay, well, you all can probably teach us some things then, or at least me. So I'm actually really eager to hear some of what your experiences have been in the past and some of the things maybe that you've done that you found to be really successful. When I have kind of been, I feel that often I am presented with an opportunity, or I find out that there is an opportunity for money for a project. And I think to myself, how in the world, like, how big does this have to be? What is the scale of this project? How can I adapt what I'm really passionate about to something that is going to be really functional and serve the purpose of the grant? Haha, purpose. So these are all the things that kind of go through my head. So we were actually brainstorming and trying to think of some examples of what that could be. So I'm a costume designer by trade and costume craftsperson by trade. And we were kind of thinking about, like, okay, if I were in this field, what would be something that would apply and kind of check all of these boxes, that I would need money in order to research, because that's another trick, right? There's funding that comes with this. So let's say that I am working with theater artists who have different abilities, who might be Parkinson's or ALS, or have Parkinson's or ALS. And I was looking to develop a new kind of closure that would empower them to be able to change into their costumes and to engage with their costumes, and so that we could change quickly backstage. But as we all know, there's also a supply issue. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to, or has tried to order anything online these days, but oh my gosh, trying to get anything in a timely manner, good luck for Christmas, right? So if I were to create a design and then find someone with a 3D printer who could actually create those fasteners. What I'm doing is I'm touching on the idea of sustainability. I'm touching on the problems that have come up with our recent pandemic. I am serving a community that may or may not usually be served in our normal production practices. And this is specifically applicable to theater production. Now, where would I put that funding, right? I buy materials for 3D printing. I could pay someone who is really good at that to design and help me print those fasteners. I could ship some of those fasteners to different theaters across the country and have them use them and experiment with them and then respond to how they worked. And then I could turn those results into a report and possibly a new product for the market that could really change how we do theater. I don't know, do you all have anything to add to that example?
I thought that had some great depth to it. Like, it shows that there's a lot of different ways to come at the requirements of this particular grant that gain you access to the funding, right? So there's a way to help underserved members of our community in many ways through this funding. And then there's also maybe how would we report that back? So Ashley, do you have any ideas of what the outcomes of that might be?
Absolutely. I think, well, that sounded like I was a news reporter, didn't it? Absolutely. So what does the product of that project look like? Physically coming up with a new design for a fastener that could be distributed, that could be a 3D print design that could be distributed that people could make themselves. I could write about my process. I could connect very specifically with different theaters that focus on those communities throughout the country. So so that it's a tangible thing, as well, like as a physical product. And then you can also, what we really encourage a lot of people to do is to write about their process of like the research and the work and how they were able to put this together. And if you publish it in TD&T or give a presentation at a conference, so that you are disseminating your process as well as your product.
That's great. And there are lots of ways to do that too, right? We can disseminate things throughout our membership through webinars like this, or through, as you mentioned, TD&T, or through our presentation, through regular sessions, through 360 sessions that happen all throughout the year. There are lots of ways to give this information back out to the membership.
And since Ashley's talking about the potential of creating a marketable product, it'd be a good time to mention that the intellectual property that's created by these research grants remains with the investigator. The only requirement of the Institute is that the Institute is acknowledged that we were part of the creation process. So if Ashley creates the world's greatest costume fastener and starts selling them by the boatload and makes lots of money, good for Ashley. We were glad to have been part of that.
All right, I'm going to toss it back to Deb for another example.
Awesome. Thank you all. That's great. Another example for those production managers, TDs out there. I work a lot in HR, so this is something that makes a lot of sense to me. As the pandemic has been raging on and theaters have been closed, there's been a lot of discussions about what happens when we come back. Do we do things the way we've always done them before? The biggest change that I think will be happening for a lot of theaters is the elimination of the 10 of 12. And so one of the possible things that could be researched, and these funds could be used to research, is what is a new way of producing theater? Can we eliminate the 10 of 12? Can we have a 5-day work week? Can we create a financially sustainable model where we don't have an 8-show week on 6 days, so that people have more of a work-life balance, so that there's more inclusivity, so that people aren't working a 10 of 12, as we all know, was really a 14 out of 16 or a 16 out of 18 for a lot of the folks in our industry. And so how could we create a new model that was sustainable? And then how do we implement it? That is a huge unknown right now that a lot of people are talking about, and the funds in this grant could be used to investigate that. And some of the ways that they can be used would be to potentially hire a labor attorney, maybe someone who is not in the arts and not in entertainment, who you can explain what you're trying to do with, and they can consult on best practices as opposed to current practices. You might research an organizational change consultant and work with them on what does the path look like. Okay, in 5 years, we want to have eliminated the 10 of 12. We want a 5-day rehearsal week, and we somehow want to figure out a 5-day performance week. How do we do that? Both in general and a literal roadmap. In year 1, we do this. In year 2, we do this. In year 3, we do this. It is people's whole job to do that, to create organizational change roadmaps. And so hiring an expert to teach you how to do that and to help you build that implementation roadmap is absolutely something that these funds can be used for. And that type of research would be really beneficial to the industry at large, and certainly hits a lot of the points on changing working conditions, on inclusivity, on excellence and commitment. And so if you wanted to do something that wasn't a tangible research project, this is an example of something that is about a change in industry standard and how we might get there. And then that can be shared in the same ways as the fastener example, certainly through writing in TD&T, certainly through maybe some webinars, maybe a conference session about what is changing in our industry and how we not only get other people up to those changes. 10 out of 12s are really tough. And then what's next? And then what's next? And we start pushing what's possible instead of resting on what is. And that's how organizational change happens, and exactly what we hope these grants will be used for. Any questions about that example or what that might be? Awesome. Well, the next.
So Deb, you referenced something that I think is a good thing to note, and that is the potential of bringing a subject matter expert into your process, whether that be legal counsel or a subject matter expert of some sort of aspect of the project that you're thinking about. So even though there are restrictions on how the funds can be spent in terms of the direct benefit to the individual applicant, there is tremendous flexibility with regard to enabling travel, housing, compensation, et cetera, for subject matter experts. So I think that's a good example in yours.
Awesome. Well, up next, we have sort of just a chunk of time that we can do a couple of things depending upon what you who have taken the time out of your day to join this webinar might need. We have some breakout rooms set up. So if you've brought project thoughts with you and would like to discuss those in a non-recorded fashion, we can send some folks to breakout rooms. If you'd like to share with the group, that's also okay. If you're like, you know what, I don't really know, that's okay as well. So I think let's open it up for individual questions about the grant or the grant process first. And then if we want to use some breakout rooms to talk about individual ideas, we can do that next. So does anyone have any questions about the grant or the process or the cycle or what can be funded and what can't be funded? Friends, we're really good at this. There are no questions.
My questions are always about what can I spend money on and what can I not spend money on? Like, that's always the thing. Like, I'm like, I had this great idea. And then I'm like, wait a second, I can't spend money on that. So just for point of reference, can we go through big things we cannot spend money on, big things we can spend money on?
Sure. I have a second screen, so I'm gonna be doing this. So I think one of the things that kept coming up that I would not have initially thought that I could spend money on, but could be really valuable, especially because we are researching are surveys. Let me tell you, just because you get surveys all the time from people does not mean that they're good surveys. Survey bias is real life. And so there are experts who can create surveys and help you disseminate those surveys and understand those surveys so that you can present actual data. And so if you are, in Ashley's example, sending out a new physical thing, and you need to get data back on what worked, what didn't work, what could improve, maybe the life cycle of it. Did it last a week? Did it last 3 weeks? Any of that kind of data could certainly be captured by a survey. In my example, I think that lots of theaters might be interested in participating in what this change is. So you could certainly reach out to theaters or arts organizations and ask, what is your schedule like? What are you hoping to change? They might not be hoping to change. One example I was thinking about with someone on this committee earlier today was, what if a roadhouse wanted to change all of that? And they've got all of these different renters with all of these different needs. Could they eliminate the 10 of 12 without it completely ruining their schedule for all of these renters? And could they eliminate a 6-7 day work week for their staff without, causing harm to their renters? That would take a pretty big old survey to get enough people to participate, to get enough data. And so that is, again, hiring that subject matter expert is absolutely something you can do with this. And surveys was something that came up. When it came up, it made so much sense. But when we were first talking about this grant, not something I thought of.
One other thing that popped out to me is the idea that it is not intended for membership fees, so that it's not intended for you to join another organization, to join USITT. You should already be part of USITT. But if you need access to an archive, or if you need to attend like a specific educational event that will offer you networking connections or specific training in an area, I believe that those things are possible, like educational program expenses, that kind of thing. So kind of understanding the difference between like registration, or membership in an organization versus registration for an event, and how those costs can differ.
Especially if you're going outside of the industry to learn something. Some of this is bringing in good ideas from other places back and implementing it into our organization. And so I have no idea what you would attend, but if there was knowledge somewhere that you needed, funds could be used to get that knowledge, whether that's a subject matter expert or attending. I don't know, Beth is on the call, so I always think about physics. I'm like, those must be fun conventions. And so if you needed to learn more about something very specific in order to move your project forward, these funds could be used for that.
Yes, conveniently, I learned more about physics by going to dinner, because the physicist is my husband, which would not be covered by grant funding, just to throw that out there. But one other thing that is specifically we called out that is included, and it goes towards a question that Patricia has put into the chat, which is that this grant can be used for modified production costs. So if you have a specific targeted idea that you want to process through production, that you want to do in production that meets the idea of our core values, right? It makes something more inclusive, like the example that Ashley gave, that maybe we expand on the idea of Dance with Parkinson's and do that into a full production, that this money can be used for that adaptation, right? We have another idea that's been running around has been, there's an exhibit out in the world that my company produced that was ADA, and the minimum requirements for architecture in the ADA. And so they built an exhibit to allow people to experience that. Is there a way to develop a production that would tell the story of people who need this equipment, whether that's temporary or is the nature of their life, that is how they're living in the world, that tells those stories and is accompanied by this type of exhibit, right? So that it's a production that's being developed. Those costs are something to develop that production or something that could be partially offset by this grant, those sorts of things. So typical production costs are not a part of this grant process, but modified production costs are certainly.
And I think this is a good time to point out that your project could far exceed the up to $10,000 that this grant offers. So if you are already in motion with some funding for a great project and you need $5,000 to get you over the hill and it meets the criteria of this grant, you can absolutely apply for funding to help with an ongoing project or something that you are already applying to other funding sources for. Everyone's funding cycle is really off right now. So we just ask you to tell us in your application, sort of, are you applying to other funding? Have you already secured other funding, whatever that might be? And so you can absolutely think about this grant as something bigger than what maybe $10,000 would cover, especially if you happen to already be doing something or working on starting something that meets these grant criteria.
And can I just throw in there, you all have done this before, but just, it is never a bad thing when someone else also wants to fund your grant. We're not going to say, oh, well, maybe they can go to them for more money. It's really like, oh, there's another organization that feels this is a really valid and important project. Let's look into this and be a part of it too. So to be a little bit like casual about it, stacking those grants is not necessarily a bad thing.
So Patricia, did we help answer your question in the chat, or do you want to talk a little bit more about it? I put Patricia on the spot, my apologies.
Unmute because I'm not actually Patricia Triana. I just realized I'm Laura Crow. My name is.
Oh.
Laura?
Totally incognito there,
Yeah,
Laura.
I
Good
didn't
job.
actually plan that. It just happened. So I'll change my name. There I am. Now you have my right name. I wondered when you're saying Patricia, who you were talking about. Yeah, I think to some degree, I think what I wanted money for is something entirely different, is some sort of new kind of production, but it's nothing to do with an invention that's going to be useful to people in the future, I don't think. It's more about an idea. I want to produce a landscape of masks from the COVID. It's a whole production kind of thing that I'd like to do with people all over the world. So it's not really, I need money to help photograph it. What I'd really like to do is hire a cinematographer, but that's, you said you can't use it for that kind of thing. So it's not that kind of grant.
I think the key thing is that it doesn't necessarily move the field forward in a way.
Yeah, I know, I understand that.
But
doesn't really do that what you want.
use
It is
it to
innovation.
But I still want to see it.
Yeah, I want to see it too. You could hire a cinematographer if you could find a way to extract some meaning from the masks to something that we could move forward. In other words, safety or COVID or something where we address that. If you could find that tie, if you could make that case, then you could use the money to hire a cinematographer to do what sounds like an amazing piece.
Well, it also was to talk about native indigenous peoples and the land and how the land has been corrupted, and it has lots of ideas, but it's not necessarily inventive, other than the ideas are inventive, but you know, the theatricality is inventive, but there's nothing. Actually, there's one thing. There's a woman in Spain who's been talking about raising different fabrics with helium balloons. That might be something new, but that's still not a new innovation. She's already started it.
I don't think we prevent if it's already started, is it? I think it's something, if it's in process and it's new. I'm asking the rest of the panel.
No,
I think as long as you establish what this particular funding is supporting in the current process,
Yeah.
then we could do that. that would qualify within these guidelines. I also feel like if it's a story about our interaction, it feels like there's a hook there, Laura, that we could find.
It's a
And I
terrific
haven't
project.
yet.
It's just going to take a lot of people to put it all together, and it would be nice to have it filmed so that it could be used later on to get more PR to help the indigenous peoples, which is what it's really all about. It's trying to help them. We've destroyed their landscape. It's a longer story.
You
Much
should
bigger
take a
project.
shot at the abstract, Laura. It's only 400 words, and then have somebody, even maybe from this panel or a friend or somebody from this panel read it. We might be able to help you.
Okay, great.
That's
Yeah,
why we're here.
I would definitely consider a cinematographer a subject matter expert, and so then that
Yeah.
person would be.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's somebody that is not a theater person that would lead expertise to the project. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
we've
particularly
got
documentary film cinematographer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've got a couple questions in the chat. And just what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up some breakout rooms. So if anyone does want to like connect with someone one-on-one, they can, but don't feel like you have to at all. And it's kind of a join as you will. But let's see, the first question we've got in here is from Brad. Is it a better idea to study existing practices? For instance, how are people restarting productions, or to study a new practice? For instance, what if we restarted in this new way? And I think that kind of centers around this whole, what does the word new mean?
I'll express an opinion. I don't know that it's official in any way, but I think that studying a new practice, what if we started in this new way, meets more of the spirit of the restart than this is what we did. There are several, several of our recent publications in TD&T have listed people's coping strategies for how they did it in response to the pandemic that we've done. But some of it might be, again, Brad's particular question, what if we restarted in this new way, is what is the new way you're restarting? And then how did you try it? What was your experiment to see if that new way would work? And what were the outcomes? That seems to be more in the spirit, from my opinion.
I'd agree with what Mark said. I think especially right now, it feels as though, I'm generalizing, I guess, for the entire industry, it feels as though everything old is new again right now, because there's no way to restart in the same way we always have. So something is new, something is different. You know, I work at a children's theater, and so it's heightened even more because kids can't get vaccinated yet. So our building procedures and our production procedures have all had to think about everything in a completely different way. And so in the restart effort, certainly we want to think about new strategies, but as far as researching sort of what has been done, it's all up in the air because it's also different now than it even was 2 years ago. So I would certainly try to stick to that forward thinking. What are we doing? How do we do it? And then hopefully there will be time within the granting year, because it's a year from funding to end of the cycle, where you'll get to apply the theory and then can report back on it. And so if you're already having those conversations about what the restart is, you're already doing it. And so if there's something actionable in that list that meets the granting criteria, then that's something that we can help fund.
That's really helpful. Thanks, y'all.
Okay.
Ross, I would like further clarification on your question, because it's a little bit general for me, maybe not the rest of the group, but any suggestions in estimating cost of bringing in specialists, subject matter experts? Do you want to bring a little bit more detail to that?
I've never had to bring in a subject matter expert. Is that something that they advertise their prices, or that's really how do I put that into a budget?
Sure. I would try to, I work with a lot of consultants and a lot of agents, and no one lists their price lists on a website. So you're not missing anything, I promise. But most of the consultants and lawyers and subject matter experts that you might need will take a phone call or answer an email. So do a reach out and say, you know, I'm applying for this grant, link to grant, and I would like to research X and would like to investigate using your type of subject matter expert in the exploration of this project. Could you find some time to help me understand what the cost implications would be, as I need to provide a budget as part of the grant? So I think definitely make sure you say you have to have some type of budget in this conversation with whoever the subject matter expert is, because that means they might get paid. They might not, but if they think it's just for funsies, they're probably a little less likely to respond as quickly. But if there is grant funding connected to them replying, that sort of raises the stakes for them. But no, there is not unfortunately, usually not a list of how much someone costs an hour. They're going to want to hear the project first, which is usually a free consult, and then decide if they're even interested in it, and they can give you a ballpark.
And may I also suggest that you ask them for an estimate of how much time you think, just so that you get a sense, I guess, so that you're having a realistic conversation about scale. So if they give you a flat fee versus an hourly rate, you have an expectation of what that's going to mean. And then you can estimate for your grant proposal. So just time and money, I would say.
And
yeah.
And I would add, what do you anticipate will be delivered at the end of their participation? So is it a done survey? Is it an opinion that is a narrative, couple page document? Do you anticipate that they're going to be a part of meetings, and the time that they would need to be in those meetings? Are those meetings in person, or are those meetings going to be Zoom style meetings? That's a lot of what Ashley was talking about gathering time. Most of your consultants are going to, whether they show you the spreadsheet or not, they're going to add up the amount of time they think it's going to take to do whatever it is that you've put together, because what they sell is expertise, right? They sell the time it takes to use their expertise to accomplish a task. And so that's generally how they keep score. Being in that world currently, the other piece of that is that consultants generate a contract on a regular basis that's called an hourly not to exceed. And so if you can figure out what this scope is, then they can give you a number to achieve that scope, but then their actual cost is anywhere from nothing to that max number that you've agreed to. So then you could put the hourly not to exceed number in the grant.
And I think also sharing as much information with them when you're first talking to them, they're going to help you focus what it is you're doing, because they're the ones who are the experts that you're trying to get that information. So the more information that you give them, they're going to give you, even in the initial consultation, more information back, which is going to help you writing the grant.
Mm-hmm.
I would also chime in that not always accepting their first number is a good strategy as well, because many subject matter experts do the same thing over and over and over again for an industry. And the kinds of projects that often come out of our brains and our entertainment industry can be very intriguing and very fun for them. So they may say, it's not that you want to claim that you're poor, because you are committing to a grant and a process that is legitimate, but you can say that, oh, that's way outside of what I think I can afford. What if we, I'm really interested in you commenting on this piece. Invariably, what we do gets hooked in a positive way. I just signed a contract with a consultant I've been negotiating with for several months, that their original price was twice as much as I could afford, but they got so interested in the project that eventually they said, okay, I'll do it for that. So I don't want to lowball everybody, but I think it's important that there is a negotiation process that can occur.
And if you generate that scope document in the process where you lay out all of these components, then you can also negotiate scope and time and fee, as Mark was saying, is that they will help you figure out what you can afford to.
Yeah.
Great,
I think
thank
the other aspect of subject matter experts is finding the subject matter expert that will suit your project. And that has always been something that I'm like, am I looking in the right direction? Am I, so I think that my approach, and please jump in if you think differently, or if is kind of casting a wide net, reaching out to several people to see what their perspectives on the project might be, and kind of getting all those different the range of costs that would be involved as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions or concerns? Or we've got these breakout rooms open, so if anyone wanted to chat with someone on the panel about a specific idea, we can do that, or sky's the limit. We're here for you.
And part of the spirit of this approach is that post this, both the email that was announced before, as well as the group of the 6 of us that are here, are more than willing to read drafts and to comment. So again, we have no role in making the award, but we want to make sure that we're enabling as many people to apply to be as successful as possible. And sometimes it's helpful to have an outside reader on your process.
And we generated another avenue for questions. Yes, there's an email address.
Email research@usitt.org. It was on a slide, but I'm going to put it in the chat right now. Perfect.
Even if you just kind of like want a brainstorming session or wanted to throw out some ideas, feel free to use that email and reach out and see if you could just grab even half an hour with someone or something. I don't know about you all, but I love brainstorming. Like if I could just get paid for my ideas. Yes. So
I have a question or something. I'd love to go into a breakout room with one of the panelists and sort of talk through something, my idea, if I can, just because it's there, but I don't know how to make it more tangible. So
yeah,
if there's somebody who's that I can jump in on and talk to
do you have a little trinket of knowledge, because we might send somebody in that would make more sense?
Yeah, I'm actually it's about the process. One of the things that I've been working on is trying to I work in educational theater, and I've been trying to build a new curriculum, a new way of training and teaching and finding
Ashley.
So is that Ashley?
Okay, I'll see you in room number 1.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have an idea that's sort of brewing that we can get you in a breakout room with someone that might help you think through things? It's okay if you don't. This was the whole point of this, was that this meeting happened a week after people learned about the grant, and we're all good to go. So it's okay if you don't, but if you do, we've got 15 minutes to spend with you.
What about am I muted? What about revisiting an old grant that you want to go back to, and the technology has changed in the meantime? I mean, it's a project that's already happened, but you'd like to improve it and make it go forward.
Do you have a new hook for it?
I don't. I'd have to explore what the new technology is, because it was done 15 years ago, and I would love to continue it at this point. But
I think continuation of a project is a very viable road, right? It tells us that you already know how the project functions, and that there's been success in that project, which lends us to thinking that there could be continued success in that project. So there's a lot to be said for that. And then if you find a new road that fits within the purpose grant criteria, then certainly that would fit.
Okay, great, thanks. Because I was working with a man in Switzerland, so I mean, it really would be, I'd have to get a specialist, so it might actually be this kind of grant that would work for that, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, the processes that we have today are so different than even the processes we had 5 years ago for some things, 10 years ago for some things. Continual improvement is sort of the crux of what USITT is. We want to move the industry forward. So the idea of sort of never resting on, well, it works, is something we are all dedicated to. So if there's a way to frame revisiting something within the scope of this grant, that's exciting to us because it like Beth said, it shows success. So
Okay,
certainly on the table.
thank you.
And one of the things that we have learned in the last 18 months is another way of really connecting with people when we can't be together.
Mhm.
And I really feel strongly that we've gotten a lot better at actually making the connection rather than just longing for the connection. And I don't know, that feels like something that we could use to propel our field forward. And this is one way to investigate a particular aspect of that as well.
Yep.
Yes, I have a secondary question. My boss came up with like 3 or 4 ideas that I think are all potentially feasible.
Great.
Would that be something that each individual, like an individual member would need to take on each of those ideas? Or can one person be the researcher? Like as the technical director, I'm often executing a lot of these research items anyways. So I wasn't sure how that would tie in.
Well, I'll give an opinion and the other really smart people on this call can jump in if my opinion is way off scale. But if you'd like to write 3 grant applications for 3 completely different projects that are all within the scope of this grant, I don't inherently see an issue with that. It's unlikely that you might get funding for all of them.
Right.
But if you are able to put in all of that work and that makes sense for your company, I don't inherently have a problem with that, especially if they're all really different.
I don't, but
It has been done in the past that way, so.
Yeah.
It has, but I think you tend to compete with yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I've seen in other processes. It's kind of like if you and your best friend run for an office. I mean, everybody likes you both equally. And, you know, if you find the one thing and really put your time and effort into that and say, okay, maybe these others can go next year and the following year, because I don't think this is going to go away, right? We're going to have a smaller grants program that's going to be available. I guess I would recommend doing no more than 2 and maybe 1. That's my personal opinion from what, you know, being on a lot of committees that have offered grants money. I think sometimes people, if you made a mistake or if you weren't as strong in your proposal, they would say, well, maybe if they didn't try to do so much, their proposal would have been stronger. And I hear those comments in my head. So I'm just telling you what I know.
Okay.
I would tend to agree, chiming in on that, is that I would look for different lead investigators, but also in the section about procedures, if you feel that you're using the same resources for multiple grants and that's going to be fairly straightforward in your applications, which I think you would want it to be, you want to lay out how those things can all happen. Right? If you have, otherwise they compete with each other in reality as well.
Okay. I think the challenge I'm having right now, I'm at a 2-year technical college. So we do like everything we do is hands-on, touch the equipment as much as you possibly can. And so Valencia College in Orlando has 6 campuses now. And so we're trying to figure out how to get equipment to other campuses to do the training so that it's more inclusive across all of our campuses. But then we also, the secondary idea was that we have students that they work full-time jobs in the theme parks and they can't come to campus. They can't ever attend in person. So trying to figure out if there's a way for us to make, if I can make a kit that can go to another college, can I make a kit for a particular class that then goes home with a student so that they could train from home virtually with us? And so I wasn't sure if those were
Okay.
separate or close enough, or if those are two.
I think those,
Again, an opinion, or go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I think those could be basically what you're trying to explore is packaging a hands-on in a distance education environment, which there have been lots of things, lots of explorations of that by force in the last 24 months. But the intentionality of actually investigating it, establishing what the minimums are, that sort of thing. Recently, there was an exchange on one of the websites talking about a costume construction class where the university sent home to every student who was remotely learning a sewing machine and an iron.
Wow.
That's what we did.
Physically invested in that.
Yeah.
So again, I think it's the nature of how you frame the research question, and that's the one take home. I have to drop out to get to another meeting in a moment, but I will say, you know, anytime we're talking about funding research, the starting point is framing the question that you're asking, because that's what you're seeking is an answer to a specific question. How you frame that question becomes what is so strong in terms of aligning it with the goals, like the core values of inclusion, excellence, and responsibility, and whether those broad themes of the purpose grants. But I think Ross, you're onto something very strong there that has replicability across and has benefit and really has great potential.
And one really well-crafted research question could have 9 answers. And that's the whole point of this. And so I think about the problem you're trying to solve and craft that question in a broad way so that 1, you don't bias your research, but 2, you might end up with a couple of different answers and a couple of different avenues that you might be able to take your research in. But it all starts with sort of what is that big, broad question you're asking?
This could also be set up in a sort of a step way too, if, you know, thinking about this in terms of the other campuses, and then stepping beyond that. Once you have a solution for that, then that takes you to the next step, which is remotely to students' homes or what have you. I mean, one of them is more controlled, one of them is a little less controlled. So is there a way to use this as an even longer research project?
Right.
Okay. Do you think it would be helpful? Like, we're already experimenting with this with kits that we're sending home. Do you think it would be helpful to start part of it with existing things that worked or did not work so that the research is leapfrogging?
Sure, it never ends. We keep pushing. You know, people figured out pretty quickly, like paint kits went out really quickly. Hand sewing kits went out really quickly. But what if you need to learn how to use a CNC router? What's next? So I think that there's still lots of sky to reach for in this virtual world. And even if it's not virtual, even you've got multiple campuses, so that's a different challenge than just being virtual. So I think if I were reading these, and I'm not reading these, I'm not adjudicating them, I would be excited to read, here are some successes we've had, and here's the next level, here's the next thing, the next progress in this research in hope to serve students better and where they are.
I think it goes a long way with adjudicators to show that you've had previous success that informs your future success.
Yeah. That's not to say that if you've never gotten a grant or never had a success that you won't get this grant and you won't be successful. But if you happen to already have that, please tell us.
Well, and I think that Ross's, yours was a great example of that. May not have been anything that's formal research, right? When you were trying to send things out to
it was
students,
desperation.
Right. But that's certainly
breeds innovation.
That fed into something that now can be more procedural, can gather data, can be disseminated more broadly, can, you know, that the non-specific research certainly does inform a more data-driven research project.
Okay.
Well, friends, we've got about 3 minutes left on this. This has been really exciting. It's for those of us on this committee, it's all sort of lived in our heads for a while. So it's exciting to hear what folks are thinking about doing. So we've got a few more minutes if anything's brewing and you want to chat about it.
I should probably know this already, but are there other granting subjects that USITT is doing? Does it have to be just this one grant?
This
I
is
think currently it's the
currently this is the only grant open.
Yeah.
But I mean, funding research is a thing USITT does. And so when opportunities arise, we certainly try to get those dollars out so that people can move the field forward. So this is not the only grant ever, but it's the only one happening right now.
So if we can't get something done by this deadline, there's still it will be again, like next year, it'll happen again. Okay.
We will have some kind of small, we consider this a small grant because it's under $10,000. There will be some kind of small grant program. It could be aligned a little differently. We could learn from this one and go, oh, wait, this is going to be better if we change these handful of things. But from what I understand, we're going to try and keep doing these as long as there's funding to keep research dollars within our membership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. This is going to be, it's being recorded and it'll be online. There might be an email, I'm not sure. But if you have any questions, please reach out, research@usitt.org. Again, just like Ashley said, even if you want a 30-minute brainstorming session, that's what we're here. We are not adjudicating. So anything you say to us, it's all we want to do is help you. So please reach out. One sentence question, whole paragraph questions. Can you help me with my abstract? We're here to serve you and to make you as successful as possible.